This is Helgen. I used to be sweet on a girl from here. Wonder if Vilod is still making that mead with Juniper Berries mixed in.
Turns out, yes. Yes, he did. Hey you, you're finally awake. You were drinking with that Sam Gaveen fellow in the Winkin' Skeever last time I saw you. I did that once. Whew. Oh boy. Yeah, you might want to get checked out by that healer in Whiterun. Just in case. So hello to all you men, mer and beast folk, and welcome to Cask Theology, where today we're on a quest to seek out the Booze of Skyrim. I'm here in my homestead in the Pale, where a good drink can see off that chill. So the big question that we're here to answer is, of course, are all the drinks available in Nirn available in your world or in your plane of oblivion? Well, of course they are. So let's fast travel straight into it. Our first quest item is every Nord's favourite, Mead. Mead is one of the oldest drinks in the world, and it's beer made with honey. There are a few varieties of the Nordic staple. First off, there are bottles littered around that are simply just described as Nord Mead. Now this is probably some small batch domestic stuff and isn't anything fancy. Unsurprisingly, it will taste like honey. Now, just like with real life mead, some folks popped something a bit extra into their brew to change things up and give it a bit of a better flavour. Enter, of course, the mead with juniper berries that we hear about in the beginnings of Skyrim, and if you go back to Helgen later on, you do actually find a few bottles of this stuff dotted about. But yes, real life mead actually got similar treatment, and juniper was one of the many berries, spices or herbs that were used to alter the taste. This gets reflected in game 2, with the Ashfire and Dragon's Breath varieties of the stuff. So at this point I have to mention that apart from the domestic brewing of mead, we've got two meaderies that mass produce the stuff and make a lot of gold making honey based booze. These are of course the Hunning Brew Meadery and the Blackbriar Meadery, and their bottles of mead can be found all across the land and in chests that are 1,000 years old. It is possibly not too far of a stretch to say that these two businesses are also adding their own blends of herbs, spices and flavourings, especially since there's evidence that some folks in Skyrim have a preference between which brand of mead they like. There are even special batches of the stuff created, such as Blackbriar Reserve, and the stats of which suggest it's a more potent brew than the regular stuff. So, is mead available to buy today? Yes, it is, but there is a bit of a caveat to that. You might need to do a bit of hunting for it. Now, I was able to get mine from a supermarket, but I did have to do some digging because there was only one that sold the stuff. Here are some regional mead producers, if you fancy going for the ultimate Skyrim experience. I was certainly warmer and happier with a belly full of the stuff while I was researching this video. Next up we have ale, and there are no big name brewers out there. It's all just a generic item called ale. Now, given the rough Middle Ages-y feel of the Elder Scrolls games, we can take a guess that ale production in Skyrim kind of parallels our own. In this case, it's locally and domestically brewed by innkeepers and housewives. There are a couple of large-scale brewing operations that you can find across the realm though, such as the one that you see in the cellar of the Nightgate Inn, which appears in the Dark Brotherhood quests. You might have noticed that this video is titled the Booze of Skyrim and not the Beers of Skyrim, and that is due to a simple fact. There is no beer in these frozen lands. Beer as we know it involves hops, but this was not always the case. Before we realised just how useful and tasty hops were, we were adding something else. A Groot. Now like mead, this would be a combo of herbs and spices that we'd stick into the brew. And in fact, the use of hops led to the distinction in two styles. Short version is this. Brews that were made with hops became known as beer, and those without became known as ale, which is what we find in Skyrim. If there was an Imperial Pale Ale, it would not be the same one that us Brits used to make. Hops, of course, are now found in every single beer that you can buy today, but fear not! It is still possible to get hold of some of these old school ales today, but again, you'll have to do a bit of exploring to go find them. Here are a couple of quest markers for some old school ales, so you can go and have an authentic experience for yourself. Hi there, future editing Matt here, and while I was grabbing some footage for this particular video, I happened to notice the sign of the Drunken Huntsman in Whiterun. Now, as you can see, it has got a nice foaming beer on it, but underneath it is a hop plant, which means that hops do actually exist in Skyrim, but like grapes, in terms of vineyards, they're not actually depicted, so we can say that they do exist in-game and in-universe. What does this mean for the beers of Skyrim? Well, it means that either their beer production parallels ours, where ale and beer are merely separated by what ingredients they use, such as ours, or it could mean that, like today, ale and beer are terms that are just used interchangeably, and both have got hops in. Anyway, I thought that was a worthy addition to Blonkin, because I found it just randomly while I was trying to edit this thing. Anyway, back to where we were. Before we move on to wine proper, in the Dragonborn DLC there is a brew known as Matze, or Mats. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Anyway, given its in-universe origins, this drink is similar to a kind of rice wine. Now, the obvious Earth parallel to this is Japanese sake. So if you have some handy, you could imagine yourself in some seedy corner of a Morrowind corner club next time you drink some. But of course, we were talking about wine, so let's talk about wine. Wine has been around for almost as long as ale and mead, so it's no surprise that we can find it in Tamriel. Now, given the climate of Skyrim, it's safe to assume that nearly all the wine that we find in chests and on desks and stuff, it's been imported. There are a few different styles though. There is a wine which is just labelled wine, which is probably mostly the same sort of cheap stuff you can get anywhere. Then there's the more fancy refined wines, the sort you might find in a posh restaurant. Surreal Brothers is a well-known producer of wine who appeared in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, who are still making their renowned drink in Skyrim, which takes place 200 years after the events of Elder Scrolls 4. Other varieties of the grapey drink include firebrand wine, ember brand wine, and spiced wine. Now, I did say that most of the wine in Skyrim is imported, but that is not the case for Alto wine, which is made from Skyrim's own Jazabay grapes. Now, I would suggest that this wine is made in the warmer regions in the south of Skyrim, but as there are no in-game vineyards, I can't confirm this. This wine must be decent though, as it is a bit more pricey than the normal wine that you can find. Now, there is no real-world equivalent to Alto wine, but there is a brand of wine called Alto, so it's near enough, I guess. Can you get wine in a shop? Well, that's a silly question, really. So let's move on to the next category. Spirits. Here on Earth, distilling was invented round about the Middle Ages-ish, but the product of distilling was used more for medicine than for producing alcoholic drinks for leisure. In Tamriel, where alchemy is a thing that provides drinks with a tangible supernatural effect, it is no surprise that in terms of distilling drinks, they are way ahead of us at this point. Now, naturally, while tinkering with potions to improve battle prowess, someone has made something that tasted amazing. First up on the list is Flynn, which is actually a very popular whisky that hails from the province of Cyrodiil. It's pricey, and you can only buy it in the Dragonborn DLC. You can't buy it in Skyrim, but given the Civil War and the fact that Skyrim has been cut off from Cyrodiil at this point, that isn't a surprise. Can you get whiskey in real life? Yep. Next up is Sujama, which has no Earth parallel, but it is very potent, suggesting that it is a spirit. It's a Morrowind drink and a favourite of the Dunmer, so if you want a real-world experience, pick a spirit that you think a Dark Elf might drink, I guess. The rest of the spirits we see in Skyrim are ones that you can get a hold of, such as rum and brandy. Rum only gets one entry, which is Stros Mackay rum, and for a real-world parallel, imagine the sort of rum you'd drink if you lived on an island covered in deserts and mountains. The final spirit found in Skyrim is brandy, which is no surprise, as that both wine and distillation exist on Nirn. There are two to pick from, both hailing from Cyrodiil and in the south, Colovian brandy and Cyrodiilic brandy. Given the inherent parallels between Cyrodiilic wine and real-world wine, I'd stake out a bottle of Courvoisier if you can. If not, then any good quality brandy will do. Finally, there are cocktails in Skyrim. Yep, you heard that right. They're available from only one place, and that's the Bee and Barb in Riften. So if you go and visit the Argonian mixologist, Talon J, he'll offer you one of the following cocktails of his own making. First up is the Cliff Racer, which is made from Firebrand wine, Cyrodiilic brandy, Flynn and Sujama. So it's a wine, brandy, whiskey with some unknown spirit chucked in mix. Second is the Velvet LaChance, which sounds more like an Agatha Christie poison than a drink, fitting for who it is named after. It's made from blackberries, honey, spice wine and nightshade. And finally, you have the White Gold Tower, which is made with cream, mead, lavender and with a dragon tongue garnish, in honour of the tower that rises above the Imperial City. Well, with Talon J's recipes, we have now explored all of the booze that you can find in the bars and dungeons of Skyrim, from stuff that's made with fruit and honey, all the way over to distilled stuff that'll knock you on your bum. So next time the Daedric Prince of Hedonism passes you a drink, you'll at least know what's in the mug that he's had in you. So, question for all you lot that have made it to the end, what sort of spirit do you reckon Sujama is? Leave a comment with what you think it might be. I reckon it might be some sort of vodka myself. Well, until next time, my fellow men, mer and beastfolk, go grab yourself a drink, and Dean Garlan.